Hello and welcome again to the Sales Revolution podcast. I'm your host, Moeed Amin, and as you know from all the other videos, this podcast is about changing the status quo on sales. Sales right now is stuck in the 90s. We're being taught things that quite frankly worked 3 decades ago. The world has moved on. My job and this podcast's job is to give you the skills to help you stand out ahead of everyone and really enjoy your success as a salesperson. So you'll be seeing insights and advice from some of the best people in the world that are not just about sales. They're going to be about things that actually help you become the best, not just learn to be the best. So today I have a really special guest. Fred is someone that I came across on a previous podcast, and he and I actually joined his own podcast. I thought what he had to share was so fascinating. I really wanted him to come on our own and on this particular show. So Fred is the founder of Brindis, which is a sales training consultancy. So for the last 22 years, he has traveled around the world 14 times and visited 36 countries. He has worked with over 10,000 salespeople in over 200 companies. So this person has an incredible amount of experience and a huge amount of practical and market driven expertise. He's taken some of the things that really makes a difference in modern selling, particularly in complex selling. And he's authored a book called Selling Through Partnering Skills. And I'm really excited to discuss the content of that book. So please help me welcome Fred Copestake. Fred, thank you and welcome to the show.
No, thanks so much for inviting me.
So there are 6 partnering intelligence qualities, let's call it that you write about in your book. And I thought, by the way, if anyone, we'll leave notes in the show notes if you want to get some more information about the book. I thought it was a great book because it talks about, you and I seem to be very aligned to the values and beliefs that we have about sales. I'm constantly frustrated by how so many salespeople out there in the world are being taught, 30-year-old techniques, skills. They're even being taught by their sales leaders expectations that quite frankly are 30 years old. And you have reawakened my belief and faith in the sales world with the book that you wrote, because it's so aligned to the fact that we're not selling to people. We are partnering and working with people. We're trying to create relationships that are lifelong for both businesses and for both individuals. So your book came as a breath of fresh air. Can you tell me a bit more about what led you to write this book and take you on that path?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, similar to what you said, it's just seeing so much stuff that people are doing that just doesn't work. It's old fashioned. And it's not as if stuff isn't changing or wasn't changing anyway. And you can see the evolution of change in sales. And obviously, when we're talking now, we just have this massive change, which just shifts where we were going even faster, I think. But I didn't foresee COVID. Probably would have written the book if I did. I'd have done something totally different. But a lot of stuff that's going on out there doesn't work. But by helping people develop the right mindset, getting the right ethos, that puts them on the right path to then start using the right behaviors and really doing things that work for all parties. So that's why it should become very, very attractive for people to want to make the shift, which I would argue isn't a massively difficult shift anyway, unless you're so entrenched in old-fashioned style. It was that really. And then, like you said, the opportunity that I've had to travel so much and to see so many different people operating and start to pick up on the things that, hey, this stuff's smart, this works, this is where we are going. So that's why I did it.
Yeah, so that's super interesting, because it's not that just the world is changing, the buyer's world has changed, right? The way that buyers buy and what they expect has radically changed. And it almost feels like what we're taught as sales is almost completely misaligned with how buyers would like to engage with sellers. Obviously, we can't do everything that the buyers want, otherwise we'd probably be out of business. But there's such a dissonance, there's such a gap between the two. Have you seen that as well? What are your observations there?
Yeah, and that was one of the frustrations. It's
Right.
people sort of asking, kind of giving a training brief, which is, hang on, it's as though you're asking for me to help you do something to buyers, as though sales is something that you do to somebody.
Mm.
And it's like, no, it's not that. I mean, that's 80s. Like you said, 90s. That's kind of 80s, get this arm wrestle with them and kind of batter them into submission of taking something from you, coffees for closers and all that stuff. And it's just like, no, it's not like that. And so all the training I'd always done is kind of more consultative, more value based.
Mm.
And that's a good, solid foundation. Let's not get that wrong. But it's just, now there's a bit more. There's a bit more. We can refine this. We really need to be understanding them, their world, what they're trying to do, collaborate with them. And then collaboration has kind of many guises, and what you actually have to do at a given time might change. And that's the skill of a salesperson, working out what's that thing that I'm going to do that's the best thing at this stage in time with this buyer, rather than the book says at this stage I do X, then I go to Y, then I do Z. Because yeah, that doesn't really work, does it?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. And it's really interesting. And I really want to get into those 6 elements that you describe in your book. Before we do that, there are just 2 main questions I really want to ask you to set the scene. Number one, when someone talks about collaboration and partnership, sometimes instinctively we think, well, that's a lengthy process, right? That feels like too long a sales process than maybe it needs to be, because in sales we have this pressure from our managers and leaders, pressure from our peers, sometimes pressure from external forces that almost pushes us to have to approach sales in a very fast-paced manner, and that requires us to be sometimes very direct. When you describe partnership and collaboration, that seems a lot slower instinctively anyway. Some people might interpret that as being a lot slower, and they might say, well, look, I can't take that kind of time because I've got pressure to hit my targets. I've got pressure that means if I don't hit them, I might be out of a job. What do you say to people that might have that view?
There's a kind of flippant answer, which is it takes as long as it takes. And that by trying to speed something up, the danger is that actually you do a lot of damage. And what you're trying to achieve, you never achieve because you've burnt all the bridges, you piss people off and they don't want to work with you anymore. And yeah, it does take time. So when we break in, go into some of the elements and certainly how we build trust and the rest of it, it doesn't happen just overnight. But
Mm.
I think that by applying this way of thinking, being kind of clear and open in that this is how I want to work, it can actually speed stuff up. Because when the customer gets, that's why you're doing what you do. I can see what you're doing. And, I would just be very overt with it. Then it will make stuff faster. I,
Mm.
I, I'm on a bit of a thing at the moment about whether customers should be invited to sales training. And I'm going around asking people this, and depending on their answers and what mood I'm in, I can go off on one or not. But for me, yes, you should. If this is what you're training and you're proud of it, and we're saying we're training our guys to work better with you because they get how to partner, how to collaborate, and it takes 2 to tango. So if you want to come on our dime, then we will all do better. I think that's such a strong message. So strong. Why would you not want to?
Yeah, agreed. And it's interesting you talk about customers being invited to sales training. What I've done for some clients is arrange for customers to record videos about why they bought from them and the things that they get from them and what they liked about the sales process, especially both before and after they became a client. And those videos are showcased within the training programs of the sales team.
Yeah.
And so I agree with you there. And it's almost as this, your answer to the fact that it takes time is almost as if you're saying, maybe at the beginning it takes time because you're creating the right foundations. But as a whole, when you look at the whole pipeline, and even the individual sales, you're going to find that actually the total amount of time is shorter. It may feel slow at the beginning, but in the end, it's a lot shorter. Did I understand that correctly?
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, and we should be pushing back on this anyway. And when we're sort of saying, if you're getting worried about timeframes, who is this becoming all about? It's becoming about you, your target. When you get the deal, when you can close, you can get your bonus. Yeah, you're missing a major part of modern selling here. That it has to be about the customer. So the more that you're getting fascinated about yourself, the less good job you're going to do of selling professionally in the way it needs to be done today, because you're just becoming self-centered.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
look, it's easy to say that in a kind of sort of philosophical and high level way, but actually that's what works. And if you're trying to say, no, I need you to sign by now, well, again, buyers aren't stupid. They'll go, well, that's cool. So I know what you're under pressure to do. Fine.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
because you're behaving very self-centered, I'll behave self-centered back, and I'll wait until you're right up to your time. And guess what? We'll go to negotiation then.
That's
Whereas
really
it's just a whole different, I think it's a whole different um, tone and feeling and the way in which people operate if we're operating on this genuine kind of mutual benefit platform.
Hmm. Yeah. Okay. Really interesting. And I think this is the topic that we can debate on for hours and hours on end. This is probably something that's more suited to Clubhouse. And actually, if anyone watching this thinks that they would benefit from a session where we actually talk about something like that, and Fred and I, and maybe we'll invite a few more experts, then let us know in the discussion, and post that, and we can actually set up a Clubhouse session where we can talk about this, because I think this is a really important topic. Because at one end you're having this pressure from your leaders, and the other end, you know, you've got to kind of adhere to the buyer's process and make them feel comfortable as well. So let's talk about those six
That'll go
things.
long into the night, and I'll tell you what,
That's
you'll
why I
probably
think
get me
Clubhouse is the
ranting on
right
that one.
message for it. Yeah,
I've had some frustrating experiences around that, but
no,
yeah, let's concentrate on the matter in hand.
I agree. Yeah. So let's start with the first of the six. It's a topic that's dear to my heart. It's the subject of a huge amount of research that I've done, and I love to hear other people's opinion on this. And you talk about trust. So, and you're deliberate in having that as the first of the six. So, talk to me about trust, from your perspective, and what does that mean to how you become this partnering salesperson as opposed to the traditional salesperson.
Sure. So yeah, the six elements of PQ. I mean, originally they were researched back in the late 80s, early 90s. A guy called Steve Dent, and so this isn't something I just made up one afternoon. Sat in the garden. It's been validated, it's been verified. There's been decent research into this around organisations that were partnering. Um, big formal alliances, the kind of airlines coming together. That's where he was working, and then sort of he looked at those and looked at what stuff what were people like who were involved in these, because his big thing, and this is one I absolutely subscribe to, is that organizations don't partner, people do. It's down to the people that are involved in those deals and those
Mm,
relationships.
mm,
And so yeah, he identified these six elements, and for me, I do always talk about trust first. I mean, they all come together anyway. They all work together. They're all kind of interconnected, as you can imagine. But you have to talk about them sequentially. You can't talk about them all at once. So I do always kick off with trust, because I just see it as the foundation for communication, foundation for relationships. If there's any one that underpins all the other, it is trust. And so that's kind of why I kick off on that one, and find it fascinating to look at the elements of trust. What makes it work? How does it happen? What can we do deliberately to try to build trust? Because that's the whole point of the PQ. It's about doing stuff deliberately, doing stuff consciously. Because if we do, that affects how we, our mindset, and then that can feed into our behaviors, the stuff we are doing day in, day out with customers.
mm.
That
Okay.
then affects our results because we do everything better. So yeah, the trust piece is so important for me. That's why I kick off on it.
So let's dive into that. How do you deliberately
So,
establish and create and build the trust?
again, I try to keep stuff nice and simple. I mean, that's why I wanted to speak to you, because I heard you speak about sort of your model with the eight, now eight, isn't it? The eight parts. I I love the trust equation just because of its simplicity, but a very, very powerful part of it.
Mm,
Um, and so, the trust equation, it's trust equals um, credibility, reliability, and intimacy divided by self-orientation.
yeah.
So the first bits of that are easy. Credibility. Yeah, do you know your stuff? Okay, yeah. Most salespeople will try to understand what they do, understand customers, all that kind of thing. Yeah, great. Reliability. Do you say what you're going to do? Yeah. Okay, fine. Nothing massively new here. Intimacy
Mm,
is what people say to you and the information they share and how they might kind of open up to you, is that safe? Do they feel as though they're in a good pair of hands? Now we're starting to get a little bit um, more kind of interesting, if you like, because this is tougher, and to portray that and to really act that becomes a lot more important.
That's
And
interesting.
again,
Intimacy almost requires vulnerability, right? So when you talked about that safe pair of hands, for me to become very close with someone, there's the saying that you kind of have to almost open yourself up to some sort of vulnerability as well to really create that true kind of close connection.
I think it does. It's a two-way street, isn't it? Because what you're asking a customer to do is to be quite vulnerable and to give you quite intimate, quite close, quite sensitive information.
Yes.
But if you're not willing to share that back, then there's a kind of, well, why should I? And this is reflected in one of the elements a little bit later down the line. But those elements, probably not massively new. Salesperson might be listening to this and going, yeah, credibility, reliability, intimacy. Yeah, I'm good with all that stuff.
Mm.
These are presented in the form of an equation. So these are all over self-orientation. So divided by self-orientation. In other words, are you doing all that stuff with your best intent, so with your best interests at heart, or the customers?
Yeah.
So it's all about intent. It's all about why you're doing this stuff. And if you're only doing it for yourself, then that brings, if you imagine it as a number, it brings the number down. The trust that you're building will not be as strong as if, no, I am genuinely doing this because I care about the other party.
Mm.
That's why I want to know my stuff. That's why I'll do what I say I'll do. That's why I will be safe and secure with your information, because I want you to get the better part of this, if you like. That for me is such the clever part of the equation, if you like, in that you've got to be doing it with somebody else's intentions, someone's interests, sorry, at the heart while you're doing it.
Yeah, I agree with you. That's the really interesting part of this. So how can you practically do that? So is it simply a question of credibility? I've got to know my stuff. I've got to do my homework. Or have you found that there are certain? Do you have any examples of some really powerful ways of being able to practically apply and do those things, even if it's just mindset or approach or belief?
I think we kind of, this is where the stuff is so interconnected, and we move into the kind of the next one, if I can, which is the
Yeah,
win-win
please.
focus. Well, it's
Yes.
win-win focus because if you really understand what the other party wants, what's
Mm.
important to them, what are they trying to get out of it, how do they benefit, why should they want to get involved in a partnership, relationship, deal, whatever you want to call it, then you can start to think about that and base what you're doing around, well, that's going to help them achieve that. That for me is the sort of the way to, this is why it's, they're so interesting the way they're interconnected. It's, if you don't get what they want, if you don't understand that, well, then it's going to be really tricky for you to be effective in applying that kind of other orientation, if you like, thinking about the other party.
Mm.
That's where that comes into play. So yeah, you can do all your own stuff, great. You can be really, really self-centered. You get the first part of trust right, but we've got to understand what other people are trying to achieve from the relationship, if you like.
Interesting. Yeah. So the big part of that is understanding what is a win for them, what is valuable for them, and seeing how you can provide that whilst giving yourself a win as well.
Absolutely. So yeah, that's the second part, win-win focus, which then starts to have an impact on, practically speaking, it's how we have discussions. Are we, if we come to a point of conflict, and we probably will, most relationships do,
Yeah.
how do we deal with that? Is it a sort of like kids getting all petulant, throwing toys, or is it, well, let's have a decent discussion because we know what we're both trying to achieve out of this. Let's step back and discuss things in that way. So it's not just the kind of, we always talk about win-win, or should always talk about win-win in selling, in that, yeah, it's got to be sort of mutual gain, if you like. But it's how we can then use that to impact on our behavior and the way that we operate to keep the relationship going. Yeah, that's what I take from that bit.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay.
And
So
one other bit while
how
we're
do
on
you?
win, no, just while I'm thinking about win-win, one other bit is that it can tip too far. Some salespeople tip too far towards the customer. So
Okay. Yeah, that's what I was going to
they
ask.
have no self-orientation at all. It's totally the other party. They're giving everything away, and you end up with a lose-win.
Yeah.
So actually, it's not a sustainable relationship because the customers think, well, this is great. And they don't realize that you're not getting out of it what you want. And not often that's financial, isn't it, from a sales point of view? But from any relationship point of view, if you're not getting what you want, again, it's not sustainable. So you've got to be looking for the balance in that. That's the sort of the key part, I think, that teaches us.
So it's interesting you mentioned that, because I was going to go down that route for my next question, but I want to take it a bit further. What happens when you have a client that's been working with you for a while, but something happens on their side, whether it's change in the buyer, the senior level buyer, with the person you have the relationship with, or it's the same person, but something has changed where now they become more demanding. And what I mean by demanding is not just that they're asking you for more, it's that dynamic is shifting more towards the buyer. And the buyer is either overtly or indirectly intimating that if you don't do this, we're not going to have a relationship anymore. So you're seeing that relationship is now shifting more towards the buyer. You don't want to lose the account because that's going to hit your numbers, and you probably have pressure from your manager to do everything you can to keep that account. What do you do in a situation like that?
Can you remember the old advert for British Telecom, I think it was back in the day? It's good to talk.
Oh
That
yeah.
was the kind of catch line that they did. And then that's kind of the sort of, again, the sort of the simple answer to that is like talk. Yeah.
Right.
Understand what's happened. Why have they become like that? There'll be something that's going on. They might well be under some kind of pressure. You know, there's something that's made that happen. What's that trigger been? Now, ideally, you'd be that close to them, you'd have seen this thing coming, and we'd have been talking about it before, and we'd have been able to sort of respond before it happens. Get your retaliation in first. We sometimes say in the rugby world, it doesn't really make any sense, but ex-players will know what I mean by, or current players will know what I mean by that. But it's just find out, what's happened there, what's gone on. We've got a nice balance, everything was going well, something has happened, and how can we do something about it? Like I say, I think ideally you wouldn't let it get that far. You would be sort of having, practical. Let's talk practical point of view. You'd be having regular sessions, sort of which are talking to get feedback, and that is another of the elements of PQ: self-disclosure and feedback. So getting feedback from them, just around, how are we doing here? How is the relationship working? How do they feel about the value that they're getting from us? Not, oh, these are my SLAs. I said I would deliver 98% on time. I've done 98.5. Haven't I done well? Can I have a, well done badge or whatever you get for them? No, well, that's what you said you'd do. It's not impressive. Yeah, I'm talking about QBRs, aren't you? Quarterly business reviews, which badly done they're just pointless. But well done, they can open up that discussion around where are we going with this? What are we doing well? So we want to do more of that. But if stuff isn't right, let's nip it in the bud. Let's make sure that we can do well. Or if there's things which are going to change, let's try and foresee these together. Yeah? If you want to really impress, it's look at their world and say, I see these things coming on your horizon. Do we need to do stuff about it? Now you're really talking about impressive selling. If you're future scoping for them, you put yourself so much in their shoes, their organization, understand them, their drivers, what they're trying to achieve, that you can lead that conversation. They'll be like, wow, why would we ever want to speak to anybody else? Who do you work for, us or them? Well, good question. I'll work for both.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
because of interdependence, which is another element of PQ. So, yeah. This is why I love it as a model. When I saw it, I just thought, this just talks to me. Talks to me about any salesperson in any situation.
Right.
Complex. I mean, yes, for more complex, sophisticated sales works very well. But even quite a sort of a more basic sale, if you're using this as your ethos, it's still good. It's not going to do you any harm.
That's so interesting. Let's talk about the next one then.
I don't know which one we're on. I just keep jumping around them because you can't help it, actually, I think, when you're starting to unpack it in the way that we're doing here.
Well, I think they're so, as you say, they're so interrelated that, of course, you're going to be moving around because you're seeing the connections as well, because you've been living and breathing this for so long. So So don't worry. I'm so fascinated by how these are all interlinked. So let's talk about the next one, right? Self-disclosure and feedback. This one really, really interested me. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, no. So we started to touch on this. So let's kind of go back to the beginning on that one. So self-disclosure and feedback. The self-disclosure bit, you used the word vulnerability already, and there is an element of that in it. It's giving a bit about yourself. It's
Mm,
saying, this is what we're about. This is how we work. This is how I am. Yeah. There is a more hard nose to it as well, because a lot of people say, oh, vulnerability, authenticity. Oh, yeah. No, it's bloody important, let's face it. But okay, if you need the hard nosed version of it, it's this is what we need from the deal. These
right.
are our expectations. If we don't get this, it is not worth it. If you want to go down the pure kind of logical black white blue thinker type mode.
But is that
But
something you communicate to the buyer, or is that for your self-reflection?
why not? Why wouldn't you? Unless they've got highly tuned ESP, how are they necessarily going to know what good looks like from your side of the deal?
But what if you come
Yeah.
across a buyer that just says, so you might come across, so my instinct now is if someone was to do that, there might be two scenarios here that the buyer would feel or think.
Hmm.
Number one, I don't care about your side, which is a very real situation, by the way. There are a lot of buyers that will just instinctively think, well, I don't care about your side, right? That's not important to me.
Yeah.
And there might be an element of that depending on where in the sales process you decide to bring something like that up. If you bring that at the beginning, then obviously that's a little premature. But then there's a second side to that where you expose that to the buyer, and it's almost as if um, you're giving them a way to either manipulate, or because they have a bit more information, they know what strings to pull now in order to negotiate you down, for example.
Fine.
Um,
Okay. So if is that how they're going to behave?
if that happens, yeah,
Doesn't sound like much of a partnership to me.
yeah,
That doesn't sound like a fair balance. It doesn't sound as though that's ever going to be win-win.
yeah.
If that's how their brain is wired, yes, they might have money, authority, need. They've got the time, they've got the competition, whichever Bant, Medic, Scotsman, mnemonic you want to use.
Mm,
But when you start to qualify on a psychological level, it's going to be very difficult to apply your collaboration skills, your partnering skills, and to work in this mutually beneficial way if they're going to revert back to type and if they're going to go all 90s on you. It does take two to tango. So
interesting.
actually, you might be doing yourself a favor by finding that out early on and going, okay, so if that is what it's going to be like, is it really an opportunity?
So
So I'm
when,
talking about qualifying out, and we know that it's very, very hard for salespeople to do that.
right.
But if we're serious about this and that we want these decent, long-term, very fruitful relationships, we need to find this stuff out.
Mm. And when is the right time for a salesperson to share such information? What are the key?
Um, I think it's continually. Uh, So the sooner that we can start to talk about that and start to sort of indicate, look, we are in this together. It's got to be win-win.
Mm,
You don't necessarily use this language, but it's got to be win-win. Of course, people will understand there's a commercial side and things that salespeople need to achieve, just as they have.
mm,
So, you know, I'm quite a fan of salespeople talking to customers about what are your KPIs.
yes.
That's an easy question, actually. I'm not saying what are your deep psychological drivers. What are your what are the motivators that are right down on the inside of your psyche, your being. It's nice to understand that stuff, but it's like, what are your KPIs? What are you measured on? Okay, cool. Well, yeah, that's good. I'm measured on this stuff, so yeah, I know we can make it work. Well, I think that the biggest blocker on that conversation is the salesperson themselves, just feeling as though they're not allowed, they can't talk about it, they've got to keep it secret, they've got to hide this stuff away.
Right.
The more we open it up and we're having this kind of conversation about, look, we're in this together, this is how it's got to look, I think the more fruitful it's going to be.
Interesting. And it's interesting you mentioned that relinquish control, because I feel that that's almost a thread connecting to the next one, which is comfort with interdependence.
Sure. Just before we jump onto that one, the
Yeah.
other part of the self-disclosure and feedback
Yeah.
is another part that salespeople can find difficult. So we talked already about getting feedback. how are we doing here? Talk to us about, what we can do better, all that good stuff. We have to give feedback as well. So, and often I know a salesperson can find that tricky. So what I mean by this is, we've had the conversation, we've talked about what win-win looks like. I need this, you need this, all very good. We're going to work in this way. Happy days. Yeah, this relationship's set up for success.
Yeah.
As it starts to pan out, it doesn't happen. So at some stage, the salesperson has got to say to the customer, hey, look, again, not necessarily these words, but hey, look, this isn't what we've signed up for. You agreed to be doing this stuff while we're doing this stuff. So while you're not doing it, I can't do my side as well. It could be something simple as sharing information, or letting me understand what you guys are trying to achieve. If you climb up on me, if you don't give me this, I can't help you. You've got to help me to help you. So sometimes we've got to say to customers, look, you're not doing your part of the deal. And so you are, moving on to the next, you are stopping all of our chances for success. And some salespeople find it a very difficult conversation to have with the customer. Oh, we can't say that to them. They're the customer. They're always right. No, they're not right. If they've said they're going to do something in a certain way, that's what we've agreed to do. That's how the relationship is panning out. That's what the journey looks like. And then they don't play their part. Could be they don't realize. So actually give them that feel, oh, we didn't realize. Sorry, we thought we were being good here. Or it could be, no, we are being. So yeah, that's quite an important piece that is worth underlining from the feedback side.
That's this is really interesting, because we're halfway through this PQ model, and there are three things that seem to be screaming out at me here, which is self-worth, maturity, and empathy.
Yeah.
And it seems like if you have those three things, everything that you just described, I mean, this is my perspective, so I'd really like to hear your perspective on this, but everything you've described there, it seems that those are the three things that are core, or at least as a character or trait that's really required and core to and important to the salesperson. You've got to have self-worth, not just in yourself, but in your product, in your solution, and how important it is, how valuable it is. You need to have maturity, because the way you just described that example there, that takes a lot of maturity, right? And then the final one is empathy, right? It is empathy for them. It is empathy for yourself, almost in some way, which is kind of tied to self-worth, but empathy for how the relationship of the two of you is going to look like, how that's going to feel, how that's going to stand out in the world. Those are my thoughts. That's what I've observed from what you've described so far.
I often, when people say to me, oh, what's all this PQ about? I often set it up as, well, IQ and EQ, it's like the lesser known cousin.
Right.
And I would say it's a closer cousin to EQ than it is IQ. It's closer to emotional intelligence, because you need those things. I describe them very bluntly. I appreciate that. That's just for illustration on a podcast so people can get it. You would not use that same language I used. Well, you might do. It depends on the social style of the person you're talking to, I guess. Some people say, oh, it's fine. I didn't realize we were big idiots. Oh, cool. Right. We'll sort that. A driver would love it. Others, you might need to tone down and adapt a bit. But in principle, that is the stuff that is part and parcel of applying your partnering skills.
Really interesting. Really interesting. So let's talk about the next one, which is comfort with interdependence.
That is precisely why we are having those conversations, because we are interdependent. Our success is going to be based on other success, in one word, and on other people being involved in doing things. Selling isn't getting simpler, is it? Selling is getting more complex. Even simple sales are becoming more complex, and complex sales becoming even more complex, and more people in decision-making units, and more elements to consider, and elements of risk now, and commercial variables, and lots going on here. So more people are going to be involved. So the good old-fashioned salesperson who sits himself at the middle of the bow tie going, no, all information comes through me. I'm the account manager, my account, all that language. They're not going to be successful, because they're going to have to give up elements of control. That's what you said earlier. So it's like, as in, well, that's what you said you're going to do. I'm going to have to trust you on it. Trust. I'm going to have to recognize that is something that you're expert in, and you need to do. I need my team. This is 360, this stuff. I need my team to help me on this. They've got to come on board. They've got to understand what's going on. And somebody that isn't comfortable in sort of giving up control, if that, from that point of view, is going to struggle in this more modern environment. Everything cannot come through them. It's inefficient, ineffective, and it actually won't work. Basically, that's how I see the interdependence element coming into play in modern selling.
Yeah, and there's a book by Ken Blanchard. It's quite a well-known book called The 1 Minute Manager, which actually talks, or at least gives a scenario and story about it, something like this. But what you described sounds to me like the skills and the approach of a scaling entrepreneur, right? You start out with your baby, your business. It's all you, and you're the one in the thick of it. It's all done in your way and your language and through your passion. But if you want to scale and make this business something that has bigger impact, you almost kind of have to relinquish control to people that actually can do it better and have the time to do it.
Yep.
May not be something you fully control, and it might feel like less of your baby, but if you are going to grow as a business and actually as a person and a leader, you're going to have to learn to relinquish control to a team that are going to be able to support you. And it sounds like what you've described is very similar to that.
Yeah, people are going to do it better, maybe because they're going to do it differently, and they're going to do different things. That's tough.
That's
I
tough.
wouldn't do it like that. Okay, do it yourself, but you can't do it all yourself. So you're going to have to let people do it their way, and really coming back to them focusing on the results. So this interdependence, because our success, our mutual success, is based on this. Let's look at the results. Okay, as long as everyone is doing their thing to contribute to it, collaborating, then we're on the right track, and we've got to be comfortable with that. Because as you say,
Yeah,
it is Friday. It's a bit scary.
it is. But actually, do you know what? There's a great benefit to this. And the way I saw it, and I went through this transition as you described it, right? In order for me to grow, I had to realize that I needed to relinquish control to the people that, quite frankly, can do the job better than I can. But you know what I found out later on was that actually that freed up my time to do the things, to have the relationship with the client that I was more interested in. I was able to have the more strategic level discussion, right? I was no longer talking about technical things. I was talking about the relationship and business partnership element, which is how is the business going right now? How is this relationship going? Tell me about your business, because I'm seeing certain things here. It looks like you're taking the business in a different direction. What does that mean to the future? And you know what? You're going to feel better about having those conversations because they're seen as higher level discussions.
Yeah.
B, you're going to be able to spot both risks and potential opportunities because you're looking at it from a 30,000-foot level rather than you're separating the wood from the trees here. That's how I saw it. So actually, there's a benefit to relinquishing control. You're taking back more control of the more exciting element of the relationship.
Yeah,
In the end, that's going to improve your sales.
yeah, exactly. You've experienced that, as a founder, but I'm an employee, account manager. Okay, well, are you a tactical account manager? Are you going to run around getting invoices processed through the system? You're going to get something from the warehouse, put it in the boot of your car, go and deliver it. And there's other people who can do that. Or are you going to be talking to senior people in that account about, as you say, where they're going strategically? The direction, the 3-5 year kind of aims they've got, and going, well, we can help with that stuff. We've got an impact.
Yeah.
I think that's more fun as well, and you'd have thought ambitious people would be wanting to take that track, and this is a route to it. You're right.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Hard though. Yeah, it's hard on the first instance. Well, that's the stuff I usually do, and I know how to do it, and I know how to do it. Yeah, it's true.
You know what? If you're going to grow, you better get comfortable with discomfort, right? Growth happens.
Yeah.
Of your comfort zone, right? So, and that's a nice segue to the next one, which is
you're a pro.
Do you like that?
I didn't even realize it was the next one. That's how cool it was. Yeah, edit this so we just segue straight in.
So let's go straight to it. Comfort with change. I really want to hear your thoughts on this one, because this one's one of the more interesting ones for me personally when I looked at the 6.
Yeah, change hasn't slowed down, has it?
If anything,
change is a constant. Was that Heraclitus? I know who it was. I can't say his name. It's Heraclitus or somebody like that.
Right.
Change is constant.
Oh
The,
yeah, I
the,
know.
Gr- the, Greek, the Greek philosopher Herac, we'll put it in the notes. But no, change is constant. You know, it's always going to be there. Um, so that's something that is as a salesperson you can understand. You can then help your customers with.
Right.
Yeah? However, we've just spoken about it again. You know, you are going to be going through some changes. There's things that you're going to have to do differently. Change is going to affect you.
Mm.
If you're not comfortable with it, if you can't adapt to it, if you can't work with it, what right have you got to be talking to anybody else about it? Yeah.
Mm.
Oh, I'm a salesperson. I challenge the status quo. And that every salesperson should understand that that is part of their job.
Mm.
Yeah. That's our biggest competitor normally, that people just carry on doing the same. So I'm going to get you, Mr. Customer, to change this, do that, apply this. Here's something. I'm not going to do anything differently. I'm going to carry on doing stuff my old way. It's just, it doesn't give you any leg to stand on. And to be fair, you won't do a good job of helping people to understand themselves if you don't understand it from your point of view.
Right.
So that's why I think this comes in as such an important part. You know, we are change drivers as salespeople, so we've got to practice what we preach and then understand, to a degree, how it works and what can we do to help people.
So how do you advise salespeople to get comfortable with change? Because understandably, it's something that people irrationally fear. So how do you advise salespeople to understand change and to get comfortable with it?
First thing, as I say, change is constant, like our Greek philosopher mate said. um, and on a basic level, I mean, actually, it's a really powerful tool. Is just think about the change curve. Yeah, think
Mm.
about Kubler-Ross type curve, where it's people will go through these different phases of change, and people will go. And everyone goes through them, but we all go through stuff at uh, different pace. So COVID is a good example of seeing this stuff in action. I'll talk about myself on this one. It's sort of when it first came about. Well, obviously, yeah, I just ignored it. It wasn't real. Not me. I went to the gym until the very last minute, and we were told not to. It wasn't the real thing. I was just
Yeah.
no. Yeah. Then I got really angry about it. Yeah, went through that part of the change curve. And just this is really angry. It's really inconsiderate. What? It's people dying, and I'm like, I've changed all my business plans. It's a bit pathetic, really, when you look back at it. Yeah, but luckily, I actually then managed to come out of that sort of dip the curve gives us, and through the acceptance and into opportunity very, very quickly,
Mm.
because I realized, you know what, stuff needs to change here. Practice what you preach, Fred. Stop being an idiot. Yeah, and get your head around this and be in a position to lead your customers, lead your clients, because they are going to need they're going to need to understand how to do this stuff. So get your head around virtual very, very fast, both delivering in it, training people in it. Yeah. VUCA, understand VUCA, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity. That is a world that we're now living in. How can salespeople talk to customers about that? How can they use the right language? How can they come up with the countermeasures? So, I just use myself as the example, because I think it's the fairest one to use. Understood the curve, pushed myself through it, got to the it is opportunity phase, and equip myself to work like that. But importantly, I didn't then go and force that on people, because they will be going through at their own pace, like I said. So yeah, I'm seeing it as opportunity. Somebody who is still shocked or angry or really kind of depressed about it, they don't need me raving, going, oh, come on, look at this. It's great. We can change things. We can do stuff. We can chat in different ways. We can get a competitive advantage.
Mm.
Right. Big mismatch in communication there. So
Mm.
it's right. Okay. I've got the stuff that we can do, but I need to slow down and talk to people in the mode that they're at, to help them through it and to then bring them into the position where we can now do stuff effectively together.
So you're
So,
saying,
it's not it's not the Fred Copestake show, but it's just for me, it just strikes me as, if I'm going to talk about this stuff, I have to use myself as an example sometimes.
no, and that was a great example. And the biggest takeaway I got for me was, you know, understand where they are on that
Yeah,
change curve, right? Are they in denial stage, anger, bargaining? depression, and then kind of acceptance and then opportunity, right? So understanding where other people are on that curve will help you communicate the right things and almost empathize with them, and show them that you understand that, and then move them to the next stage. Because like, you're absolutely right, and I never really thought about it this way, but you're absolutely right, because a lot of people reach a certain stage that's ahead of others, but they kind of almost expect, and this is where the self-centered element comes in, they expect people to kind of come on board because they're on board. Leaders are the worst culprits of this, actually. Well, at least some leaders are.
They're probably, because they're change initiators. They get it, they see opportunity, they move with it, which is why they're leaders, and then there will be people who are slower at it, and will resist it even, and still push back. It's not real, it doesn't exist. They're in that kind of denial phase forever, a lot of people, for about everything. So yeah, it's quite interesting when I really started practicing what I preach. Though I'd got the answers, some answers, I don't know the answer to everything, but things that were clear to me of what people need to do. If they're in angry phase, Fred, don't stop telling them what to do. Go into counsel mode almost. Be the sounding board. Let them rant, let them rave, let them do whatever, let them feel better, and then start to offer a bit of a light at the end of the tunnel. So it's about that sensitivity to others, and high emotional intelligence, like you said before, to be able to react and then help people in the way they need helping at that time.
Interesting. Okay. So that was really interesting. I'm glad that we covered that. It was one that I was really looking forward to discussing with you.
There are plenty of change models. You can look at Kotter, you look at freeze, unfreeze, refreeze, and all those, which are useful and good understanding. But actually, for me, I keep going back to change curve because I like simple stuff. Simple stuff done well trumps really flashy stuff that you don't quite get, or you mess up.
I agree. Change is emotional.
And as salespeople, we're terrible for that. Oh, nice new shiny things. Let's go and do all this. No, let's get basics right. Let's get a good solid foundation.
Totally agree. And look, change is emotional, right? You put any logical framework you want to it, but it's emotional at the end of the day. Whether someone does it or wants to do it or not, there's an emotional reason. It's just like most decisions, actually. So let's talk about the final one, future orientation. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, so future orientation, a number of elements to it. Is, again, as you can imagine, ideally in the partnership, we know where we're going. We have this vision, we have this goal, we've got this thing that we're aspiring to, and that's going to inform how we work. How we put our plans together, how we decide to collaborate. It'll give us that direction. And so that's one element of it. The element that I often talk to salespeople about, that was as well as that, is the part around decision making.
Right.
Because we can have this wonderful vision, we can sort of put all this stuff together and decide this is where we're going, and then as we come down to the practicality of it, the actual proper to-dos, we make decisions based on past experience. I'm not saying that's totally a wrong thing. Yeah, of course we're going to use elements of it, but when you relate it 100% back to that, it makes no sense, because it'd be like, oh, we can't do that, never worked before. No, but things weren't the same then. It's we can't sell by video. Well, we can, but that's a different thing. But can't sell by video. Well, you haven't got a choice. You have to at the moment. Or the technology was rubbish when you tried it last time. When was that? Oh, it was 20 years ago. Right. Okay. When a web conference suite was the size of a car. It's like kind of. So yeah, I think the really interesting part in that is not just the sort of vision that you're sort of aspiring to and how you can align to it and all look towards it. It's making that decision not wholly based on the kind of the good old days rose tinted spectacle stuff. It's let's do it looking forwards and sort of keep ourselves moving forwards. That's where I like with that thing. It's keep advancing, keep moving forward, keep moving towards where we want to be rather than we are or were. But that's kind of what comes out of that for me.
So the big thing for me, the big question there is what happens when you do come across someone where they are kind of stuck in the past, and what you said is neurologically correct, which is we base our interpretation of the world around us on the foundation of past experience and conditioning and knowledge, because
Yep.
our brain needs that for the contextual elements to translate what that means. Now, obviously, that leaves a gap in terms of a lot of the time, not a lot of times, but there's a big chance that your perception is incorrect because it's based on past experience and conditioning, which may also be incomplete. But what do you do with someone who doesn't seem to be future orientated, who doesn't seem to want to think in that way, or they're stuck in the past that actually caused them so much hurt that it's very hard for them to do so?
I mean, again, a simple tactical way of doing this is play let's pretend.
Right.
Let's pretend that we can do these things. What would it be like? And then we find that the stuff we're pretending we can actually do. It's not even pretend. But by framing it like that, you can actually have that conversation in a more positive manner. So yeah, okay, accept that, totally get it. Because as you said, it is true. It's their reality. But let's pretend that we could do that. When we're sort of doing creative thinking and brainstorming and trying to generate ideas, I will often, having done the first round of, how can we approach this? People kind of think in their normal rut, don't they? Yeah. Okay, this is cool. Like these ideas, these are good. But Taylor, let's spice it up a little bit. What would Harry Potter do? And everyone kind of looks at you and goes, what? You know about? Do you all know Harry Potter? Yeah, cool. What's Harry Potter? He's a wizard, right? So he's magic. So he can do stuff,
Right.
that we can't. So if Harry Potter was trying to solve this problem, what would he be doing? Oh, he'd like put on his invisibility cloak and sneak up on people. And then, okay, right. So can we translate that into real life? Oh, he do a magic spell and make all the competitors go away. Okay, right. Well, what can we do to make that happen in real life? Can't do magic, but we could make something that makes our offer so compelling that actually nobody is in competition with us. So you can just sort of stimulate thinking a little bit, just to nudge folk out of the rut that they think in sometimes, or their habitual thinking pattern.
Yeah, that's good pattern interrupts that you
Yeah,
just described there.
and thinking hats. Thinking hats is another old goodie. It's been around for ages. The Bono's thinking hats. Let's put the different color hats on, because
Right.
sometimes the backward thinking can be a bit negative, can be a bit black hat. So again, having explained to people the different colors and the different ways of thinking it's trying to stimulate, so this is great. Oh, Mo, this is brilliant. I admire your what if thinking. Yeah, get it. Devil's advocate, top man. But tell let's pretend. Let's all put yellow hat on. Let's all be really positive about it.
Right.
Yeah, falsely positive if you like, over positive. Why are we so brilliant in our idea? Let's just big ourselves up, because we will come back to the black. Yeah. So again, you can play with the different hats and sort of the red kind of stimulate. How emotionally or how do we feel about that? That's a biggie. We talked about emotions already. Yeah, we'll probably start with white. What do we know? What facts and figures have we got? So again, just using a model to break thinking patterns, I think works pretty well. Whether you use that again overtly, say this is a thinking hat model, this is how it works. Pass out little hats to people. Well, I've seen that done. It's really cool actually. It's quite good fun. Or using your facilitation skills to move everybody. Let's all think like this. Let's all think like this. Let's all think like this. That's how we can practically move. Help people with their mental agility if they're a bit stuck with it.
Yeah, and I'm especially a fan of the hat, the hat model, because I spent 6 years helping advise chief R&D officers around innovation, and they would regularly use that kind of model.
Yeah.
But this, what you described, if you're going to do that with a client, it sounds like you can't do that unless you've done the previous 5 things, because you've got to create such a deep relationship with them that they're willing to play that game with you. Almost.
Yeah. If you're going to be handing out little toy hats,
but even asking them something like, let's just all be positive about that, right? I mean, even with if someone's especially feeling like they don't want to be positive, right? They will find a way to kind of push back on that. But if it's with someone that you seem to have a good relationship with, and someone that you trust, then what I'm saying is you can't do that with someone where you haven't built any relationship, you haven't built that kind of intimacy with.
Oh, you can't rock into a meeting, however good your elevator pitch in the first 30 seconds, and then dish out this thing and say, right, I'm going to ask you some questions, but you need to be answering me in this way. It's like, whoa, no, hang on a minute. But as you say, when you know them and you know how to do that, you can read them because you have the baseline, you've calibrated them as to, yeah, guess what, Mo's a bit grumpy today. Actually, it's probably just not even a good day for having this discussion. But because we do meet pretty regularly, because we've got a decent partnership here, then yeah, forget it. I'll do it a different day. In fact, let's find out why he's grumpy. Let's see if I can help on that level, because that'll be far more useful and far more resourceful to the whole relationship anyway.
That's interesting.
Okay, the sales faltered for a day, big deal. Our relationship's got way better though, so good investment of time, I'd say.
That is really interesting, because sometimes it's a personal matter, and that again, that takes a lot of maturity as well as empathy to do something like that.
Yeah. How inconsiderate that you're in a bad mood today when it's nearly the end of the month and I was trying to close a deal. I can't believe it.
Exactly.
And it's again, we go back to that one, don't we? But it is. There's a huge maturity in it and understanding that that's the right thing to do. We have our primary and secondary objectives for meetings. You know what? In this case, forget them. Different route, because that's the right thing to do at this stage.
So I'm conscious of time, and we're getting close to time, and Fred,
I'll talk about it all day. You know that.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And maybe we should invite you for another session, actually, because and if you're open to it, we'd love to do so.
Of course, I'd love to.
That'd be great. And I've learned a ton here, and so thank you so much. I've got a couple of questions I want to ask you as we wrap up. Number one, what do you feel is the biggest barrier or difficulty for someone to be able to apply your PQ model in their sales business?
The biggest barrier to applying it, themselves. And again, it sounds like some of my answers are a bit flippant, but I honestly believe that, because I don't think there is a barrier. There is. It's a way of thinking. Yeah, there might be external factors in that. I can't see why would a sales manager, sales director say no? You cannot think in this way. You can't be modern. You can't be more effective in your approach. I mean, if that's the barrier, that's a completely different thing. But it's kind of knowing how to do it. And I think if you start to understand PQ, if you start to break those things down like we've been doing and start to think about them practically, understand where you are on each of these, then you should be able to shift your barriers. But when I say yourselves, we've always done it this way, or I've always done it this way. I'm comfortable doing it this way. Breaking out your own comfort zone, that is probably the barrier. But I mean, now is the time. If there's a time where you can make a change because you really need to, I would say that it's probably now where you can. It's worth investing that time, because it is a modern approach, and it's one that can only serve you well in this current climate.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. That's a really, really interesting answer that you gave.
Can we pop in the show notes a link to a PQ audit? I'm very happy because you and I both want salespeople to develop, to get as good as they possibly can. That's why we like talking to each other. We're on the same page there. So if we give a link to the audit, it's free to take. Just pop in your email address, because you need to then get the results sent back to you. It'll ask you a bunch of questions, and it'll give you the sort of little breakdown of those 6 things, how you're scoring on each of them, and some reflective questions to try to break those barriers. So if we pop that in, people are very, very welcome to take that. It's what I use in training, but hey, we'll share it with everyone else.
Absolutely. Let's add that in there. That's going to help out a lot of the viewers. So yeah, for sure. Penultimate question. Which 2 books do you feel every salesperson should read and know?
Well, there's only one left on the list, because clearly mine. But which
two more on top.
2 more. Which extra 2 books?
Exactly.
Chimp Paradox, first one. I love that book. Just the whole kind of mental model and the way that you can understand yourself, how you think, and how you can try to manage it. It's such an elegant way of approaching a very, very complex thing, the brain. I mean, how many years have you studied it? I mean, years and years. And was it 7 at uni plus this plus it?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but I think it helps. It helps you to understand yourself a little bit.
Right.
Um, the other book I would think is probably worth people reading at the moment. I've just read a book by a guy called David Allison, which is about value graphics. So rather than talk about demographics and how you might segment customers there, it talks about how you could segment customers based on their values. And whilst I'm not saying that it is then something that salespeople wouldn't necessarily take away and apply directly, just that understanding that there are so many deeper levels that we can go to really talk and connect to people, that can only benefit you in how that you move beyond sort of, what are your clear needs and wants, to that sort of the more deeper way and how you can connect with people better. Probably not explaining it well, but it's more of a marketing book, but I just think I enjoyed it. It's the last one I've read, actually, so that's probably why it's fresh in my mind. And it's got me thinking about who I talk to, how I talk to them, and even if I want to talk to them, because if they're not aligned on values, it's going to be a very, very difficult thing to do. So it's kind of alluding back to that psychological qualification I was talking about earlier. I'd recommend that just as a way to open your mind to it. You might not apply it 100%, but it will get the brain going, and it's really nicely written. So yeah, I'd say that at the moment. That's a very current one for me.
Those are really interesting ones. Thank you for
Yeah.
sharing those, Fred. So how can our viewers connect with you, learn more about you?
LinkedIn is usually the favorite. Yeah, so it's a go to LinkedIn, Fred Copestake on there. I think I'm probably the only one with that surname, that full name anyway. Yeah, that's the best one. Yeah, LinkedIn, and connect, drop me a message. I'm very happy to talk about this stuff, as you can probably guess, and share. And if it's helping people get better at what they do, I'm all up for that. So please do connect. Yeah.
Great. Well, Fred, thank you so much for joining us today. I thought this was incredibly informative. I took a ton of value, learned a lot of stuff from there. And really, just to summarize, this is about partnering with people, not just selling to people. And this is about long-term relationships with people, and you can only do that where you have a healthy relationship as partners, rather than just vendor or supplier and buyer on the one side. It's both of you coming together towards a future that you're both forging together. So I thought this was an incredibly valuable session. Thank you so much, Fred, for sharing what you have with us. I really appreciate it.
No, my pleasure. Thank you for priming me with some decent questions.
No, it's my thank you. It's my pleasure. And look, to everyone watching this, what are your thoughts on this? Please share with us your comments. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so that you can get immediate notification of when these new videos come about and we publish them. And who in your community do you feel would best value and learn from this kind of information? Do please share it with them, because our goal, and I know Fred and I share this, which is to elevate the success and the approach of all salespeople. So please share with any of those that you feel would really value and want to learn this type of information. Till the next session, thank you very much, everyone, and we'll see you soon.